Welcome everybody. Finally, things are working now. So thank you for being here at our webinar. Everyone is welcome, and all of our webinars are free. But as you know, we have some expenses. So if you can, please donate to help us pay for our expenses. Any amount helps. Just go to our website, rockymountaineatheist.ca, and you can find the donate button there. A few introductions here. We are an inclusive community of atheists, humanists, skeptics, and secular freethinkers. We welcome everyone, all backgrounds, everyone is welcome. We have never had any disruptive attendees at our webinars, and please, with your help, we'll continue with this record. Discussion is encouraged as long as everyone shows respect for one another. We have, at the end of the presentation, a Q&A, so you can ask questions to the speaker. Just use the Zoom option to raise your hand. And I'll call you when it's your turn to ask the question. Quick disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed by speakers and audience members during this event are their own and do not reflect the official policies, positions, or views of the RMA, the Rocky Mountain Atheists. Our guest speaker is Jon Michael. He's a philosopher, computer engineer, ghost hunter, investigator of paranormal claims, and he will be talking to us about making critical thinking go viral, the case for skepticism, and how to make it contagious. So now I'll stop sharing so our friend Jon Michael can start his presentation.
Hey guys, let me get the presentation going. I hope everybody can see it. Um, so yeah, first I'm also having internet problems too. I think I'm past the storm. We had an issue where like our internet just for some reason was just disconnecting for some reason, just like totally going offline. So if I cut out, I will be back as quickly as I can. It seems to be like intermittent. Um, But first, who the heck am I? So my name's John. You may have seen me around, and if not, that's okay too. So I started off my life in a very, 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 very conservative Christian family. I was raised Southern Baptist, but I was raised by my grandparents who went to an archaic and independent Baptist church. For those of you who aren't aware of what those mean, essentially, my grandfather went to a church that felt like it was considered sinful to have electricity in your church, sort of like the Amish, but you could live however you wanted outside of church. And my grandmother went to what's called an independent Baptist church, where they, if you ever heard of like hellfire or damnation type preaching, that's exactly what they preached. And so, very much yelling and telling people they were going to hell. And so, my grandmother, whenever they adopted me, decided to take me to a Southern Baptist church because it was uh, they had like a youth program, if you will, and they felt bad about it for most of their life. They even called Southern Baptist a bunch of dirty liberals. And if you know anything about the Southern Baptists, they're about as conservative as you can get. So that's how conservative, right? That I grew up, and this is making no. If you're conservative, totally fine. I do not. This is not what this conversation is about today. Just giving you a little bit of background about my life. But because of that, I went to Southeastern College of Wake Forest, which was a Bible college and a seminary. And that's where I entered into philosophy. Southeastern was an interesting school because they taught critical thinking. It's one of the few places, at least in the United States, that still teaches something called the trivium. The trivium is teaching reason, and basically they want to teach you how to think before teaching you what to think. Turns out, if you go to a college that reflects your beliefs, and if you were raised by a family who only has like, your beliefs also, and all your friends have your beliefs, and you immerse yourself only in your beliefs, and you don't expose yourself to the outside world, all of a sudden, when you learn how to think, you start asking questions. And so that's where I wound up. I wound up leaving seminary my final semester. I should have stayed to get a dang degree, but I didn't. And from there, I went. One of the things I started doing and enjoying was ghost hunting. That lasted for about 2 years before I kind of became a skeptic. And over time, I have become like a full-fledged scientific skeptic. There's not a particular thing that kind of just caused it to happen. It's just one night I just was like, this is who I am now. This is kind of where I arrived, and that's who I am today. And I actually now I spend my time speaking to both skeptics like yourself, how we can better engage with believers, and also speak to believers, and how specifically about like critical thinking and things of that nature. And I think it's great because I have a couple of people in the chat today who are here watching this, who do tend to identify as believers. And I think it's great that they took the time out of their night to show up and come to this organization, um, like a skeptical organization like you guys, to take your time. So I know skeptics need evidence. So hopefully that's some evidence that some of this stuff works, right? So I'm so glad you guys came. I really appreciate it. And to everybody, I'm glad you guys took your time to hear what Jon Michael, who's a ding dong, has to say. So I wanted to take a second and talk about like what's so bad about belief, and we kind of have to like take a pause here. But I think it's important to define our terms. So when I talk about belief, I'm not like everybody believes something. Skeptics like to well, there's a few skeptics that I've met who like to say, "I don't believe anything. Like I have evidence for everything I believe," and it's whether you have that stance or not. In my personal opinion, and many other smart people who are way a lot smarter than me, we all believe something. Uh, there's kind of certain layers of belief. There's just regular belief. There's justified belief. And so, whenever I talk about justified belief, that means that's a belief that we have that we can back up with supporting objective evidence. And then there's true justified belief. Whether that's possible or not is a conversation for another time. But we all have unjustified beliefs, right? And we try not to, but inevitably we all do at some point. And the goal is to turn those unjustified beliefs into justified beliefs, to find evidence for what we think is true. And if it's not true, to discard it and to believe the thing that is true, right? That tends to be like our goal as skeptics. And so another thing, like especially when I talk to believers, when I use the word skeptic, everybody thinks they're a skeptic. You'll often like I have never run into one person who said, "Well, I'm not skeptical," and and I appreciate that. I can't tell you how much I do appreciate it because that means people are at least critically thinking about something, and I think it's a good thing. But tonight, when I talk about belief, I am talking about unjustified belief. And people, when I talk about believers, I'm talking about people who value unjustified belief. And when I talk about skeptics, I'm specifically talking about scientific skeptics. And what I mean by that is people who take a worldview that in order to believe something in our heart of hearts, we have got to have supporting evidence from a scientific perspective. Um, and so those are our definitions for tonight, because everybody believes something and everybody's skeptical about something. So that's what we're running with, and I hope that makes sense. So when I talk about belief, what's so bad about unjustified belief? Um, we're going to go through. I'm a big PowerPoint guy. Love PowerPoint, but I tend to have it up for you guys to kind of read. But I don't tend to actually go through my bullet points. I just kind of talk with where I feel like my PowerPoint wants to take me. And sometimes these conversations get kind of off track. So, with that being said, just be aware that if I'm not talking about what's on the PowerPoint, it's totally fine, but that is for you. Feel free to take screenshots. I do not mind if you pass anything I have to say around. And if you ever want my sources or if you want my presentation, please let me know and I will gladly give that stuff to you. And so, what is so harmful about unjustified belief? Um, I think two major things. And the first of those, it creates an environment of post-truth. That's something I think the United States in particular, in terms of our political system, is going through right now. And often when you hear post-truth, You hear that in like a political context. Post-truth sort of sounds like relative truth. So again, let's define our terms. When we talk about relative truth, that is, there is no such thing as objectivity. And what I mean by objectivity is truth that is true in of itself, right? Like it's not true to you, it's not an opinion. It is true because it's true. It's true to everybody. It doesn't depend on a person, right? Like if you jump, gravity is going to pull you down objectively. Gravity doesn't care if you don't believe it or not. It's going to pull you back to the ground. So gravity objectively exists as far as we're aware, until a better theory comes out to replace it, right? And so when we talk about relativism, that is basically everybody has like a subjective truth, and there is no real such thing as objectivity. And if it's, what's true to me may not be true to you. That's not what post-truth is. Post-truth is very much there is like an objective reality, but you can't quite tell what is objective and what isn't. You can't quite tell what is true and what is not. And so because of like all of the confusion, we just kind of accept those like who are living kind of like a post-truth container, accept almost anything that aligns with our beliefs. As long as it aligns with our belief, we don't criticize it. We don't think hard about it. We don't try to debate it. We just accept it because it kind of gives us a plus one to the evidence, quote unquote, column. Whereas if we see something that goes against our belief, we ignore it. We cast it out and we don't think about it. And so that's what post-truth is outside of a political context. I'm actually going to pull. Oh man, where'd my mouse go? We are professionals here tonight, trying to represent an entire nation to my Canadian friends, and I couldn't find my mouse. Need to get my notes up just in case I do get off track. Just to keep me on track. Also, guys, I have ADHD, and I around this time is when my medication is completely worn off. So this is the worst of me right now. So thank you so much for if you're able to keep up. Thank you for keeping up, and I really appreciate it. But the second big issue with valuing unjustified truth and unjustifiable belief is the foregoing of logical consistency. And so a lot of times in paranormal, and my focus is like the paranormal, right? But you can apply a lot of this to politics, to religion, to all sorts of things. And also understand, like I want to make this clear too, like just because you are a believer in the paranormal or anything else, like you don't necessarily fall into these categories. I find that most people do, but not everybody. And so it's really important to point out. But a lot of times in the paranormal, in fact, just this past weekend, I was at the Paranormal Research Symposium. So I had submitted an abstract to talk about science. I wanted to talk about um, falsification and how people can just think more critical about some of the experiences they're having. And my abstract was actually accepted. And so at a paranormal conference or paranormal symposium, they allowed me to come in and talk about science and critical thinking, which I thought was awesome. And I'm very appreciative of that. And this isn't to poo-poo on any of those speakers. Legitimately, it was the best paranormal conference I've ever been at. There were some presentations that could have fit into a like Skepticamp or skeptical conference, like excellent, well-researched presentations for most of them. I didn't necessarily agree with um, any of their conclusions per se, but a lot of the presentations were just really well researched, really well done. I was highly impressed for this weekend. Um, but some of the things that you'll see is this foregoing of logical consistency, where people will make a claim, um, orbs or dust, right? So that's all where we kind of stand. So I don't know if you've ever seen like the classic orb pictures. You take a picture in the dark, and you get these little circles on, your screen, and those circles, if you look in your camera manuals, it's called a circle of confusion. We've known about this since photography has been around pretty much. And with the advent of digital photography and getting rid of, the actual extended lens and where we now put our flashes, orbs are everywhere when you take pictures. And if you look in your camera manual, it's called a circle of confusion, where the light bounces off the dust and creates what looks like an orb. Known about this forever, and thankfully in the paranormal world, they're coming around to the idea that maybe it is just dust. I would say most of the people I bump shoulders with now think orbs are dust. However, a lot of them believe that it's a ghost or like a spirit of someone that has passed on. Um, but often you'll hear those two messages. So someone might say, well, yeah, orbs are dust. And most people will tend to agree. But then someone else can like talk about an experience they had, or maybe they were feeling something interesting, and they'll take a picture and see an orb, and people will give meaning to the orb and agree, like, yeah, that definitely was a ghost. And so there's this like logical inconsistency where they understand, one thing, like it's probably dust, but they don't always apply it if certain conditions are met. Um, some other things that you'll see, you may see, again, not everybody is like this. So when I say they, I'm not referring to every single person in the paranormal community. But you'll often see, like, for example, let's talk about Bigfoot, right? So some will say Bigfoot is a cryptid walking around in the woods that science has just never discovered. But in the same conversation, you could have somebody else say, well, I think Bigfoot is an alien or maybe even an extra dimensional traveler. And both people will agree with each other. But both things can't be true, right? It can't just be an organism that was evolved on the earth while at the same time also being an interdimensional traveler. Those are objectively two different things. But often in the paranormal world, you'll find people agreeing with each other. And so a logical consistency breaks down. The big problem with this isn't so much for stuff that doesn't necessarily matter a whole lot. I mean, I think it'd be awesome if Bigfoot was discovered. I think that would be fantastic. But people, when they expose themselves to these logical inconsistencies outside of the paranormal world, they continue to exhibit the same logical inconsistencies and will often accept two very different viewpoints, or three, or four, or five. And they almost can become malleable. And now, I'm not saying that every, um, you know, particular person who believes in the paranormal subscribes to a particular let's just say like political viewpoint is very much not true. There's a lot of diversity in the paranormal world when it comes to at least American politics. But as an example, it's there are some people who were exposed in certain ways to certain logical inconsistencies in paranormal circles, took that, kind of lost the ability to think critically and be logically consistent, embraced conspiracy ideas and conspiracy theories as and using the paranormal almost as a gateway, embraced conspiracy theories, and, and from there, the next step is moments like January 6th. Please do not think I am saying that people who believe in the paranormal are storming the Capitol. That's the last thing I'm saying. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that there is a pathway there for some people to go that route. Just because the certain circles, I would say most circles in the paranormal world, do promote a foregoing of logical consistency. The third thing that you will often see that's a big problem, and again, this goes back to it traces a path directly to conspiracy theory, which ultimately leads to like an erosion of trust in the government, which leads to populism and authoritarianism and things of that nature. But most, like a lot of people in the paranormal world, which I thought another reason I thought this symposium last weekend was great because you very much did not see this very much at all. But you'll often see what's called saturation or flooding or over volumizing. So it's where, and you may have seen this before. Like if you have a friend who loves conspiracy theories, you may have seen this before. But it's where someone just inundates themselves with evidence. And so let's say someone is trying to prove that orbs are ghosts, and they have a strange picture that they don't know quite how to describe. And so they may show someone like me, like a skeptic, like an orb photo. And maybe I can explain the orb photo. The next photo, like, well, what about this one? It's also an orb photo. Well, then they may log on to like their local Facebook group and they'll say, well, look at all these orb photos. Look at like all this stuff that everybody's catching. And so, as someone who's trying to have a conversation with them, we can debunk one or two, right? Or we can have conversations about, and also I hate the word debunk. I'm not a debunker. I think debunking is part of the process, but it is not my goal. So, when I say debunk, that's I don't start off debunking. Debunking is part of the process. If I can come to the conclusion that it's probably not paranormal, then let's debunk it. But you can do that with like one or two. When someone gives you 50 or 100 different pictures, to them, it can seem like overwhelming evidence. To me, they're all the same, right? Like you explain one photo, you show me a second photo that's slightly different. I mean, it's kind of the same thing, right? The same thing with conspiracy theories. So a lot of people will have like conspiracy theories, and they may bring up a single point, and you can spend all day talking about that point, right? Because it's so much harder to disprove their point and talk about their point and get them to come around. And it's so easy for them to take 5 seconds and be like, well, what about this? Right? And now you're starting the whole conversation over again. And so the problem for some people in the paranormal world, or people that have unjustifiable beliefs, is that when they look for evidence, again, quotes, to prove their beliefs, their brain is going to find a way to find evidence that confirms their beliefs. We call this confirmation bias. I think as skeptics, like we, for the most part, get this. Do not think that we are immune to it. We very much are not. We also can fall to confirmation bias, right? But we understand it for the most part. And so, but a lot of people in the paranormal world just don't. And so often people will try to prove their beliefs. And as a result of trying to prove it, if you seek, you will find. And they very much do find. Now, whether the evidence is actually evidence is up for debate. I have never seen any good evidence that the paranormal is real. I'll be honest with you guys. I hope I do one day. Like I hope someone is able to prove the existence of life after that death. I can't think of something I would want more, right? I just personally, I don't have enough evidence for it. And so I don't believe in it, right? But you will often see people just bring up folders and folders and folders and folders of evidence. Go into any paranormal ghost Facebook group or anything like that. And again, I'm not saying most people necessarily believe the stuff that are in those groups who also believe in the paranormal, but you'll go through and see a lot of just wowed at the evidence. At the Paranormal Research Symposium, there were like a few times where someone would make a claim and have no evidence behind the claim. It was just a claim. And you could kind of hear some people in the crowd just, wow. The claim was enough to make them believe and add that as evidence to their own worldview, right? Like very little critical thinking behind that. And again, not talking crap about this paranormal research symposium. I cannot tell you like how impressed I was with it. Seriously, great time. But there were, as with all symposiums, skeptic, paranormal, or whatever, there's always a few, issues here and there that we may not agree with. And so the final one, and I think this for me is the most important. For me, this is why I do what I do. And I'm actually going to show you some examples of this. But for me, if you have an unjustified belief, it is extremely like when I say extremely easy, I mean overwhelmingly so to fall into something called an external locus of control. And so when we talk about locus of control, like what does that mean? That is a person's self-perceived center of control of their own life. Ideally, you want an internal locus of control. You want to feel like you're in control of your own life. You want to feel like the decisions that you make in your life are decisions that you chose to make, that something outside of you, didn't force you to make those decisions. Um, but an external locus of control, which often happens to people who have unjustified belief, will have a locus of control that exists outside of themselves, where something externally is in control of their life and is telling them what is right or wrong, whether they realize it or not. And I find that most of the time people don't realize it. People think they are in control of their life. People think they are making decisions for themselves, when often they aren't. I'll give you an example. During my presentation, I was giving an example of how to falsify or try to disprove a belief or claim you had. My hypothesis, which is, I think, heavily backed up by data, is that if you attempt to disprove a belief you have, or if you attempt to disprove a hypothesis, one of two things are going to happen. One, you're either going to walk away throwing everything you can at it for that belief to come out to be pretty solid. Like if I threw everything I had at it, if I doubted it as much as I could, and I questioned it as much as I could, but all of my doubts and all of my questions wound up with the belief being correct. That's a pretty dang good belief, right? Like we're in a good solid world. But if you throw some doubt at it or you throw some skepticism at it and turns out your belief is wrong, that's also great. It's great being wrong. Skeptics, we get that, right? It's great being wrong. Why? Because we get to learn something new, and that's awesome. Like, right? Like, I love learning something new. And we get to walk away with a corrected belief, and we get to move forward, and we're a better person today than we were yesterday because we have new information about the world around us. And so I was trying to present that. I asked someone if they had an interesting paranormal story they wanted to talk about. And in the story, this one lady told me that she had, and I don't remember the exact story, but it was an interesting story of where she was using something called my mind just blanked. Bleh. Again, ADHD and nighttime, not great. Two horrible combinations. But it's a device where that basically it's like a radio that sweeps through AM and FM stations. And the idea is that if a ghost is there, that they can somehow use that signal to communicate with the living. Um, I think that they're picking up little snippets of AM and FM radio stations, and our brains, which are wired to make sense of things that don't make sense, because that's how we evolved and that's how we survived as a species, basically create order from disorder. I think that's what's going on. And unfortunately, I have not seen evidence to the contrary. But as usual, I hope that someone has evidence to the contrary, but I've never seen it. But she had asked a question and heard an answer on her radio that was sweeping. Spirit Box is what that's called, which is also one of my favorite bands. So it's sad I forgot about that. But it was using a spirit box, and she heard a word. At the same time, she was using an app on her phone, and the app, whatever word she heard, was a very similar word showed up like on her phone. Now, I always have questions about your memory recollection. How long between the two events is significant, right? Is it significant if it's 2 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 3 days? Like, like, how much time is required to be significant? But besides all that, we can start having a conversation about, well, why do you think like a ghost interacted with your app? Like, I'm just like, let's talk about that. By the end of the conversation, I think she had kind of come to the realization that she was listening to what the app had to say. She just downloaded an app off the internet, right? Was using the app. And when the app told her something, she just believed it without questioning. And through our conversation, I think she was able to realize that she truly did not have control over that situation. She was allowing an app to have control over her life. Granted, we're not talking about like, she's not going out, like the app's not making her a zombie. She's not out, just throwing money at the app developer. It's not totally in control of her life, but it is control of an aspect of her life. And that's important, right? Like we want to feel like we're fully in control, but she very much wasn't. She was listening to an app, and whatever it had to say, she took full force. She had been told by someone at some point that the spirit box works in the way it does, didn't really ask very many questions around that. And so was just listening to the spirit box and listening to what whoever told her. She was letting those two claims without evidence dictate her life and dictate specifically what she believed about life after death, which again, I can't think of a bigger question. And so for me, that's a huge thing. It may not impact her life day to day per se, but when enough of that occurs, it only takes a few of those to pile up to where you are literally driving for hours to investigate places, spending just tons of money on what you could spend on other stuff. You may be buying paranormal equipment. You may be paying psychics for readings. You may be, subscribing to UFO magazines, whatever else. The issue, and none of that is inherently bad. Please subscribe to UFO magazines. They're great. Well, I shouldn't say great. They're entertaining. And so the problem for many people in the paranormal, and I would argue probably most people that hold beliefs, maybe everybody, in fact, I don't normally speak in absolutes, but in this case, it may be one of the few that I may go to that extent. And for my believers in here, love you guys. I do. I respect the hell out of you guys. Um, but it's why I do what I do, because I think many people who hold beliefs without questioning them are being controlled. Their locus of control is external. It's not internal. They're not in control, fully in control of their own life. And so as a skeptic, it's important for me to ask questions because that's demonstrating that I am in control. I get to decide what to believe. Just because old Cat wants to tell me that vitamins are bad. Well, that sounds interesting. I was told to take my vitamins all the time. Why are vitamins bad? Even if that's true, and it sounds like it is. Can't wait for our presentation at Triangle Skeptics. Please show up. Kat's going to be giving it. And even if that's true, if I believe her without questioning, Kat very much is in control of my life. And I know you guys know Kat. It's probably not a good thing. You probably don't want Kat in control of your life. But regardless, somebody else is in control of an aspect of my life. If when I don't ask questions, I am allowing someone to have influence over me. But when I ask questions, I become the judge of my beliefs. I'm no longer determined by a belief system. I no longer just have an identity to a belief. I am the judge of my beliefs. I am able to take these beliefs, I'm able to critically think about the beliefs, and I get to choose based on the evidence, right? Always based on the evidence. I get to choose what to believe, and I get to be justified in my belief. And I choose to believe, what Kat said is backed up by sound reason, is backed up by evidence. And I think what she had to say has merit, and I think it's justifiable. So I am choosing to believe that, right? And that's the difference. At the end of the day, we arrive at the same place, but I'm in control. And as a skeptic, that is incredibly important to me. And I hope as believers, it's also important to them as well. I think everybody wants to be in control of our life, and we can do that by asking questions and exhibiting an internal versus external locus of control. I wanted to show some examples, and please understand, these are extreme examples. And also, I want to warn you, I should have warned you before I showed this. These are about mental health and serious loss. And so if you need to take a second, I will be here for about 5 minutes. So I promise you guys, I will, if you need to take a break from this, I will be back I'll pass by this in 5 minutes. But please understand that not everybody that holds paranormal beliefs, in fact, the slim majority, or sorry, I guess the overwhelming majority do not have mental issues, at least like debilitating ones. We all, no one is really normative, if you will. Everyone has slight perks. Uh, but so these are extreme, right? And I'm not making a claim that people with beliefs have issues or anything else like that. But what I think is important is the response that these people had. In the first, so there's two examples. I know there's three screenshots, but it's two examples. I just kind of want to guide you through it real quick. Someone asked, "Have you ever have you ever experienced something that seemed paranormal at first, but later realized it had a natural explanation?" I think it's a really good question. Um, Someone responded, "I hear voices," and I'm going to read this, as I don't know if you guys can actually see it or not, but said, "I hear voices 24/7. Most of them do nothing but insult me. I don't have to try to come with a non-paranormal reason that I am hearing this. Schizophrenia is not a disease, by the way. I know better than that." Later, she followed up. I need to move my chat box so I can see. Later, she followed up as she responded to this conversation later, and she said, "For a paranormal group, there are so many extremely close-minded, mean people in here. You actually talk to ghosts. You're in a relationship with one. That's ridiculous, and you should seek therapy, get some meds for schizophrenia. Seriously, do you hear yourselves? I hear voices all day long. I'm not crazy. I just have more sensitive hearing and brain processing capabilities than most people." Um, yeah, I'm not a psychologist, right? I don't have any kind of mental health training or anything. But as far as I can tell, she's got some issues that I hope she gets some help for. Seems like schizophrenia to me, especially the voices in the head that are saying, calling her names. And this isn't my issue, right? And I would have taken screenshots of this. I just wouldn't have enough space on the presentation. My issue is that many people, instead of replying with like empathy, replied with light some sage, right? If you light some sage, those voices will go away. Um, you know, uh, do X, Y, Z. It was all things of that nature. This person needed medical help, but unfortunately, because she was posting in a paranormal board, she got paranormal answers. And so again, I'm not making a claim that even that most people, if they heard this conversation who believed in the paranormal, are going to tell her a paranormal response, right? Not the claim I'm making. I think many people would, paranormal beliefs or not, would have suggested she get therapy of some kind or talk to somebody. But in this case, people were so much living in a post-truth mindset where they couldn't separate what they believed from, you know, reality, if you will, that they were giving her advice that caused her harm. And this is someone that was able to leave the paranormal space. I want to read it real quick because I want to get into like empathy and stuff. I realize I only have like 15 minutes left. Um, but this is someone who was able who decided that the paranormal was not for her. Which says, "I give up. Everything paranormal I believed in, I don't believe in anymore. I don't trust anything in the paranormal world anymore. I remember when my daughter died. This is making me tear up. This is why I do what I do, right? But I so wanted to get another chance to say I loved her. It's hard, right? I'm sorry, guys. This is why I do what I do. Why I talk to believers because people have been hurt by this stuff. Um, it sucks. But she was able to escape thanks to a guy named Beardo, who is a debunker. But she was visiting psychics, and they were taking advantage of her. And she had, when she had issues, she was given paranormal responses that that didn't do anything. They didn't apply to her life, but thankfully she was able to escape and get the help she needed. And so again, I don't like I'm saying this over and over again because I want to hammer this in. I don't think everyone in the paranormal world is like this. I don't think everyone is taking advantage of each other. I think as skeptics, we think that a lot of times. We think that everybody in the paranormal world is just taking advantage of each other. And oh man, there's a bunch of con artists out there. Yeah, they're con artists, but not. I wouldn't say it's most of the people. And so I kind of wanted to get into like what we can do as skeptics. Um, and I kind of have like three things that we can do. And I want to talk about part of this. I want to talk about what we do a really bad job at because we do. There's things we don't do so well about. Um, but the easiest thing that you can do is supporting those on the front lines. I put four of my favorite people on here. Kat, don't tell Kenny that I said that. Um, but if you're not subscribed to Skeptical Inquirer magazine, please do. And I understand that not everybody can afford it. They do have an option where you can donate to the Center for Inquiry for as little as $1 a month. And I know for some people that's also just not doable, and that's okay. But that's an option. Kenny Biddle, if you don't know Kenny, he also visits people, paranormal believers, and engages with them to kind of introduce critical thinking. Melanie Tracy King does Thinking is Power. She tries to do what's called inoculation, which is to teach critical thinking um, to before others are exposed to belief systems that may take advantage of them. So I think she is absolutely outstanding for what she's doing. Legitimately, I think she is doing perhaps the most important work that I've seen in the skeptical space. She doesn't get the recognition necessarily she deserves, but legitimately incredibly important what she's doing. And finally, another way you can get involved is supporting Guerrilla Skeptics. That's Susan Gerbich's organization, um, with doing Wikipedia edits and making sure that they are consistent with truth. But if you like to take like the next step uh, and actually like get physically involved, I highly encourage that you do that. It's one of the things that I do. I kind of want to talk about how to do that. Um, I think it's important, one, to break down echo chambers. This past weekend's paranormal research symposium was just that. They didn't have to invite me. They didn't have to accept me, but they did. And like, I applaud them for that. I applaud you guys for as well because, of your statement, like anybody is welcome. I love that. It's the way it should be. We should go to each other's events, right? So we can better understand each other. Uh, and I'll tell you, man, I actually learned a lot this past weekend at the Paranormal Research Symposium. I unfortunately think that, I'm not saying anybody here thinks this, but I think that a lot of skeptics think that we just don't have anything we can learn from believers. They're a bunch of dummies who just run wild with their ideas. Um, are there dummies that run wild with their ideas in the paranormal space? Sure. Are there dummies who run wild in the skeptical space? Absolutely. Right? They're everywhere. Dummies are not exclusive to either side. It is not a characteristic of someone who believes in the paranormal to have a low IQ or to be unintelligent. It's quite the opposite. In fact, I have found many very intelligent people in the paranormal space. Many people that I met this weekend were incredibly intelligent and taught me a lot. I talked to a parapsychologist, and we had long conversations about the value of skeptics talking to other skeptics about believers. Excellent conversation to the point where I had to rewrite this presentation and rewrite another presentation that I'm giving later. Because he brought up a lot of really good points I never thought about before about how we kind of create our own echo chambers as skeptics sometimes. That was a believer, the paranormal, right? Like a parapsychologist. But we talked about like the objectivity of medicine. I never really thought about how subjective medication can be. And I went and verified that with external sources. And he's absolutely right. I just something I never would have thought of. And so don't think that like, you can't learn something from believers. You absolutely can. And one of the things I think we can learn that we need to do a better job of, that the paranormal world does just a wonderful job of, is empathy. Um, like holy crap, do they have that down pat? Paranormal people can empathize like no other, and make you feel really good, and not in like a malicious way, like a genuine loving way. Um, uh, I don't have my list up, so I can't see who's online. But if Karen and Chris are still in here, like the amount of people that I've seen reaching out to Chris as he's going through chemo has just been like outstanding. And they both continue to support me, even though we have different worldviews. Both Chris and Karen continue to support me. Guys like Dustin Crowley. Dustin Crowley is a pagan demonologist who dresses like a vampire from the 19th century. But I cannot tell you how much that guy supports me, even though we have completely opposite worldviews, and how he consistently gives me a platform to talk to believers. And so I think we can do a better job of that as skeptics. That's the next slide, and I'm skipping ahead. But um, I think we need to break down echo chambers. We need to get involved in these paranormal communities, and they need to get involved with us. We need to invite them and be kind to them when they come. I think we can learn a lot from each other. Uh, Finally, Carl Sagan said this, but it's better to light a candle than curse the darkness. And I do see, again, not pointing a finger at anyone in particular, but I do often see um, statements made by skeptics that I don't know how much value they have. And it very much is like cursing the darkness, right? And darkness is not good. We know it's not good. But what good is there to curse the darkness? Like, it doesn't do anything. Maybe it makes us feel better as people. But I can tell you as a one-time ghost hunter, it sucks, right? When a skeptic tells you you didn't have an experience, or a skeptic tells you you're stupid, or anything like that. There's studies that show that when we talk to people like that, the opposite occurs. Instead of bringing people closer to the truth, instead they grind their heels down and they don't want to listen to you anymore. It's not doing anything for anybody. But if we talk with people and care about people and invest in people, um, that's really what you're interested in. Like if you want to change people's minds, investing in people by lighting a candle in the darkness is the way to go. What's some ways we can do that? Talking to them. Number one, you're going to get criticism. And as skeptics, I think we are kind of used to that because we often criticize ourselves and criticize our own beliefs. But lots of ad hominems, right? You will get people who will generalize you and maybe even stereotype you. And unfortunately, some of that is kind of warranted. But just prepare for it and just let that go. Like it's gonna happen. Let them talk and get their anger out and push past it. Uh, 100, I mean this, 100% of the time, once I've got past that, we're good. We can start having a conversation. They got their anger out. I didn't snap back. I didn't try to disprove them. I let them be heard. Because some people just, they need to be heard, right? Instead of just fighting each other with conversations, hear each other out, hear what they have to say. Maybe they make a good point. Maybe once you hear every single believer you've ever come across say the same thing about skeptics, maybe they're on to something, right? I don't think that they just made like their viewpoints up about skepticism. And so they have good points of what they have to say, but move past it, hear them out, let them be heard. Um, Also, understand their internal motivations. And what I mean by that is what motivates a skeptic is not necessarily what motivates a believer. And you're only going to be motivated by what already motivates you, right? If if feeling something, like having a like experience or just something that like feels uplifting or positive or you know giving me like a sense of wonder. I think you can get all those things in science, but um, that really is like where a believer's mindset is a lot of times. They talk about like some wonderful experiences they've had, and I truly believe that they have experienced something strange. I may disagree about their conclusion about what that strange thing is, but I believe them when they talk about experiences, right? I think they did experience something interesting. I just don't think it was a ghost, right? Um, I think it maybe they had a waking dream, like a hypnagogic or hypnopompic hallucination, which I think is just as fascinating that our brains can do that. But really, you have to invest in people and talk with people and understand what motivates them, and you have to be open because what motivates them may sound a little wild to you. It may sound a little woo woo. That's fine. Embrace the woo. Don't accept it per se, unless if it has great evidence to back it up, then by all means accept it. But hear them out and understand that they are motivated by those things that may seem like woo to you. The thing is, it's important to them. And if it's important to them, if we just sit around and talk crap about it or call them dumb or say, well, you can't believe that, they're not going to go anywhere. And I see I got 2 minutes. So this is my final slide. So I'm going to try to push through this. But I wanted to tell a quick story. I'm part of the Triangle Skeptics here in Raleigh. And just this past week, we had, or past meeting, we had someone actually come to our meeting who was not a skeptic, and which was great. Um, but he told us a story where he had a strange occurrence while he was asleep. And he woke up and it looked like something was like climbing on his wall. Um, and he wanted our opinions. Like he believed, like he 100% experienced something supernatural and paranormal. And so there were two responses from our group. One response was like, well, that didn't happen, right? Well, yeah, I mean, he experienced that, right? Again, I'm not saying it's a ghost, but this is an experience he had. So to him, it happened. And so when you believe something has truly happened to you, to hear someone else come up to you and say, "Well, that didn't happen," what do you have two options here. What do you think is going to happen? One, do you think they're going to be like, "Oh, you're right. That didn't happen. I've changed my mind, and now I'm a skeptic too, and I believe everything you believe. Thank you for this conversation." Do you think that's going to happen? Or do you think they're going to be like, "Wow, you're kind of a jerk, and I don't really want to talk to you anymore"? Those are pretty much the two things that are possible to happen. And I'm going to tell you, most of the time, people are just going to think you're a jerk if you go around telling them that things didn't happen when they think it did. And it's okay for you to believe that it didn't happen. But to tell someone with certainty it didn't happen without hearing them out in any way or talking with them or confirming that, it's important to them, that sucks to hear, man. Like it sucks. And so he got a lot of that. The other group said, well, you can't think that. You've got to, it was probably a hypnagogic hallucination. He started fighting back. Well, it felt so real. And then, well, they just responded, well, you can't think that. No, 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 don't think that. You can't think that way. We can't sit here and tell people what to think. Don't get me wrong. Is there a correct way to think? Absolutely. But do you really think that telling someone you can't think a certain way is going to motivate them to think correctly? And so I'm not trying to brag or like say how great I am, um, but I've had these conversations before, and I was a believer at one point too, so I kind of get where the guy's coming from. And so I did a Melanie Tracey King, something that she taught me, and I think is excellent. I basically asked, like, on a scale of 0 to 100, where do you think like it fell? Like where, like how certain are you? He gave me a percentage. I think it was like 99.99%. I was like, cool, okay. So you're pretty confident. And I was like, well, what makes you 0.001 not confident? Let's talk about that. And so he gave me all sorts of reasons on why it may not be real. And so we then talked about those reasons, right? Not once did I tell him what to think. Not once did I tell him, well, you shouldn't think a certain way. He's the one that had the conversation. I was just guiding him. I was just asking questions. I was interested in the story. I thought it was a fascinating story. This is where empathy comes in, right? Think about if you had the same exact dream, and there's something climbing on your wall. I don't care if it's a dream or not. I'm probably pooping the bed. Sorry if that's descriptive. I'm just telling you how it is. And so it sounds terrifying, right? And so to confirm, yeah, man, that's terrifying. To hear that kind of story is scary. I would have got up and run away. I would have run out my house. But to listen to people and hear them out and hear what motivates them. Why is that important to you? Why did that feel this way? Are you open to talking about other things? If you're open to talk about other things, can we talk about those things? Cool, let's talk about those things. Well, what do you think now that we've talked about those things? Guys, you're not going to convince someone from one conversation to totally change their worldview. The only person that's ever going to change their worldview is that person. You're never going to convince someone to change their worldview. Only we can change our own worldview. What you can do is push people a little closer, a little closer, a little closer, until hopefully one day they have the tools to pull themselves out. And so the final two things, I think I covered the final two things in my story. Facts don't change minds, right? It takes three things. Facts are important. I feel like as skeptics, we've got this one down pat. I might be biased. But two, emotions, that's the other thing that really changes people. If he decided that he wanted to become a skeptic that night, where does he go? Does he go with the group who told him how he can't think or how he shouldn't think? Maybe even insinuated that thinking in such a way may be the mark of someone that's not very smart. I don't think anyone in our group said that, but maybe he thought that. If you logically feel like maybe this isn't the way to go, there's still like an emotional chain there, right? Like where we may not make a change because we emotionally feel like we aren't supported in a particular group. We need emotional needs as well, not just logical needs. We all have emotional needs. And my goodness, do the paranormal people have that figured out? They do a really good job of showing emotions and working together and having emotional empathy. And I think it's something that we as skeptics can do better because I think we so often live in the rational, we forget about the emotions, and emotions are valid, right? So listen to hear people out. Don't forget your rational playbook, right? Like that. But we need to also empathize with people, hear them out, uh, listen to their stories, let them talk, let them be heard. But then ask questions, right? If we just hear them out and then we don't ask questions, we're not doing our job. Ask questions. Ask for permission to talk about. Validate their experiences, and by validate, I don't mean believe them, but believe they happened as they describe it, right? Believe that an experience, a strange happening occurred to them, but then walk together, work with them to come to a conclusion together. Figure out what it is together. Don't fight each other. Don't go to war. Truth is very much a path that we can take together and arrive together at truth. And if that truth, there was a creature on the wall, well, I'm not going to ever sleep again. That's terrifying. But if the truth is that our minds hallucinate when we're waking up, I think that's fascinating. And maybe he will too. And finally, like I said, empathy is the path forward. We gotta stop as a community thinking that just because someone doesn't subscribe to skepticism, that they're a big dummy. It's not true. The Paranormal Research Symposium is evidence of that. There are very intelligent people in the paranormal space. Sure, there are some people who may not be as well educated or equipped, but I can probably guarantee you that nobody came into this world with all the answers, and nobody came into this world completely equipped, as Carl Sagan would say. That no one has all the right answers, right? And so instead of fighting each other, instead of fighting people that have beliefs, we need to walk with them. And maybe we'll learn something on the way about ourselves, about our fellow human beings, and we can help people. Like that lady who experienced loss of her child and was being taken advantage of, or maybe even like the person who probably needed some kind of mental help, or just with your regular, average, everyday paranormal person who I think could probably learn how to critically think better. But you know what? I could too. I could learn a lot, how to think a lot better. I think that would be great. But you can discover those things together by having these kinds of conversations. Um, so that's pretty much it for what I've got for this presentation. Um, I hope that was helpful. But I will gladly take any questions that you have.
Wow, that was amazing. Um, does
Oh,
anyone?
thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Hello?
Yes,
Yes,
I can
okay.
hear you.
So, okay, so I see David with his hands up. So, yes, David, please ask a question.
No, that was a thumbs up on the presentation.
Oh,
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
uh, okay, so someone else?
It was a very good presentation. It just reminded me of a lot of the things that I've read or dealt with myself. I hadn't heard the term logical, what is it, internal logical consistency? Is that what you said?
Yeah, there's two different terms. It's so what I'm used to is called motivational internality. I think it sounds fancier, but I think how most people say it nowadays is internal motivation. I kind of flipped it. Is that what
Right.
you're referring to, or
Yeah, that's what
something?
I was referring
Okay.
to.
Yeah, yeah.
The politics in the United States, it's so terrible, and they make so many logical fallacies. Probably the biggest one is ad hominem, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
they're wrong, they're a jerk, which has nothing to do with their position or the evidence for their position. They just attack the person, or they start off with the outcome, like, oh, vaccines don't work or vaccines cause a virus. And then they look for evidence, to support what they started off with, which is backwards. It's not the way
Right.
it's supposed to work, you know.
Yeah, I was actually having this conversation at the Paranormal Research Symposium, and this is not to say, I did not mean to. Oh my goodness. Whatever. This is where I'm staying. But and this is not to say that that we aren't necessarily living in a with a president who is teasing authoritarianism. I think we are. It's not to say that um, you know that we are kind of abandoning certain political norms that we have had in our country for a long time, because we are. So I don't want to dismiss the truth, the reality around this, which is what's happening. What I think is unhelpful is when one side calls the other a bunch of communists, or the other side calls the other side a bunch of fascists. I just don't think that kind of rhetoric is helpful. It's not changing anyone's mind. It's you're just shutting people down, and they don't want to listen. And so I think you can use these exact same techniques to talk to people of like a different political persuasion, and have those kind of conversations and meet in the middle and talk about actual issues. That's just my opinion.
Okay, Kat, you are mute.
Forgot that. I lowered the hand, forgot to unmute. Sorry. That was a great presentation, John, without an H. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The one parallel that I never drew before until this presentation was how similar the paranormal community is with the alt med community, in that they listen and they empathize and they give time and they make people feel heard and
Hmm.
then provide a solution, whether or not that solution is actually helpful or not. So
Yeah,
that was really, really interesting for me to make that connection. So thank you for that. That was really great.
yeah, for sure. And I don't necessarily think, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't necessarily think that it's something that is intrinsic about belief systems, that empathy is just part of that. I think it's intrinsic about human beings. And I think there's just something about the skeptical community where we have embraced rationality so much we have forgotten what it's like to be emotional creatures. And we all are, and we all have those emotional needs. Um, and it sounds like this group has a lot of that, but there are many groups that I think have just forgotten almost how to feel, if you will. It's so yeah, just again, my opinion. My opinion.
Okay,
I'm glad
Jim.
that was helpful.
Oh, Jim.
Okay. Um, Something that I think is a useful essay to read is Defining Supernatural by Richard Carrier. Uh, and he makes a distinction between paranormal and supernatural. Uh, he defines supernatural as something where you have mind that is not dependent on something material, that you can have a soul that's separable from the body, something like that.
Hmm.
And then paranormal is something that's just not really well established as even existing. So, so Bigfoot, or an example from a few centuries ago, meteorites that
Mm.
uh, I think it was uh, 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 okay. Anyways, the name will come to me. Anyway, I could sooner believe two Yankee professors would lie than that stones would fall from the sky. And then when some really major meteor shower occurred over a fairly densely populated area, and yep, lots of people picked up. Okay, it's now at least reasonably well established that it actually exists. Yeah. Anyway, so just uh, something that's now considered paranormal might actually become well established as existing, and then we can start trying to figure out what causes it.
Yeah, the way I've always defined the difference between supernatural and paranormal, and I don't necessarily think everyone's going to use these words, but I think they understand what I say. So Kant had this idea, like Immanuel Kant had this idea of a priori and a posteriori. And that's basically before experience and after experience. And so essentially, like we can talk about things in one of two ways, or well, there's one or two different kinds of ideas, if you will. There's purely something that is like an idea, like justice, or ethics. Like we can't put justice and ethics in a test tube, right? Um, you, you can't do science to figure out what justice is. And so there are things that are outside of science, and Kant would call that a priori, like before experience. And I think the supernatural falls in that realm. Does God exist? I don't know, but it's very much outside of the realm of science, unless if God kind of entered into our space, we can't prove or disprove God, right? So it is very much outside of science. I think
Yeah.
a posteriori is we can use science to talk about it. And I think that's within paranormal space, right? A lot of people will say, that is a good point, Clyde. Uh, and the you know, we can't use science to talk about ghosts, but if the claim is you can see a ghost, you can touch a ghost, you can hear a ghost, you can smell a ghost, or whatever the fifth sense is. I'm way too tired to think of the fifth sense. Whatever that one is. If we can do any of those things, that means it's measurable, and that means we can use science to figure it out. So for me, the paranormal has always been questions that are very much within the realm of science, but the they're mysterious enough where it seems supernatural. Like, it's
Yeah.
kind of hard to like put a finger on it.
Yeah.
Um, but
I like the way that Carrier in his essay pointed out that, hey, if we could actually determine that the supernatural existed, then we could investigate it scientifically.
yeah, I'd have to think through that one before I
Yeah. Anyway,
respond.
I recommend
Yeah,
reading the essay.
yeah. I've actually I wrote it down as we every once someone recommends something, I've got it written
Yeah.
down, and it goes
Yeah.
on my list of things that I will eventually get around to.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Clyde?
John, I think you said something about not labeling people, but I wanted to I think you said for not calling Democrats communists was an example, and not calling conservatives uh, fascist. I think that's. Did I get your? I don't want to misquote you. Is that your idea, basically?
Yeah, I would say so. I'll go into a little bit more. So, like my grandma, for example, right? She will say that if you are a registered Democrat, you are a communist.
Okay.
All Democrats are communist. And then I have had conversations with other people who will say all Republicans are fascist. So
Okay.
for me, it's the labeling of an entire group of people
Okay.
by something when that group does not claim to be what that is. And I
Right.
think if you actually think through the definition, it also does not apply to most people.
Right. Yeah, because I was going to say some things do apply, like with Trump. I do think the term authoritarian applies, and I don't know what to
Mhm.
say objectively, but I guess scholars would say, I think most scholars would say that he is an authoritarian, or psychologists, mental health professionals, whoever defines, the experts who define what an authoritarian is, I think they would say that Trump is. And I
Yeah,
also read, I looked at, like, I don't know, and maybe it was as many as 10 different polls, like all the, like Quinnipiac, all the reputable polls,
I know it's so hard.
yeah, credible polls. And they asked most Americans, do you think that Trump is a racist? And the majority of Americans, it was only 52%, but it was still a majority, thank goodness, said that he is a racist. And so racist is one of those words, it's very charged, it's very
Yeah,
emotional. And I agree that people just throw it around. Sometimes they just use it like asshole, some they don't like. But, I mean, I think when you have, I guess that's probably more than 100 million people who think Trump is a racist. And I think he is a racist. And I think I have
I don't
very
disagree.
good evidence. So I think
Yeah,
sometimes the label applies, and it's not just, like a schoolyard name, and you don't like somebody, you're just looking for it. I think there's, sufficient evidence to conclude that. And I think also in America, we tend to, like, a lot of people like to deny that racism exists when it does, especially
yeah,
when Obama, and then a lot of times too when people, if you say something to a person, they have these like knee-jerk defenses, like I have a black friend, or
right.
I dated a black person, when I was in college, or Hispanic, Asian, whatever, something proximate to a non-white. That's usually the reason. I work, they're on my team, in school,
Mhm.
same kind of things. They rarely just say, okay, I'm against the system. They don't talk about it from, a social science would be like, okay, how is this group treated in society, not, who your friends are. So they usually get the definition wrong. But when you look at Trump and the policies that he's, put forth, and the things that he said, and the things he's done over many, many years, I think it's rather clear, and I think people are seeing that as well. So I just wanted to get more clarity, and I agree.
Yeah,
We should make blanket statements. Like, I would never say all Republicans are racist.
Right.
I would never make
right,
a, or all conservatives. I would say that you should go person by person and, see what policies they support, or over history, did they support, racial segregation? You have to have reasons. You have to have good reasons. You can't
right,
just say, okay, they're in this group, therefore they're this, which
right,
I feel like is very common, in politics, for people to do that to their opposing side, to just say they're all the same way, like you pointed out. And even though I am a progressive, I don't say all people who are, are center right. All people who are I don't say all people who are right or center are bad people, and they all have good
right.
motives. Sometimes they just disagree with me.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally 100% agree. Like I've heard. So I guess like what I mean is, I think also talking in extremes. I agree with everything you said. I think. Well, I would probably, in my opinion, again, this is just my opinion. Um, I think Trump is a hard right populist leaning authoritarianism. You know, I think the reality is, see, this is hard, right? I'm going off on a tangent, and I'm going to come right back. Like, would any of us, if we had the ability to take absolute authority and like given the opportunity to take power, who wouldn't be corrupted amongst us, right? Who wouldn't become an authoritarian if you had the ability to become one? I don't know. I would like to think I wouldn't, but would I? Um, so I think at minimum we can say he is a hard right populist leaning authoritarian, but I probably agree with you. He's probably authoritarian. Where I start to also get into kind of hangups is when people call Trump a Nazi, right? I think that does two things. One, I don't think he's a Nazi. I don't think he meets any definition of what Nazism is. Uh, Two, I think that um, minimizes what actually happened in World War II and what the Nazis actually were about. I think there's a minimalization of that and about the atrocities they committed. Now, if he starts, don't get me wrong, I think he's committed some stuff that you could, splitting up families and shipping people to hostile nations that they've never been to, like South Sudan, just because they were trying to seek out a better life by coming to the United States. I think those things are atrocious, right? Horrible, and we shouldn't be doing them. But he's not, sending people to gas chambers and ethnically cleansing in that way. So, and some could argue like, oh man, like it's close. My point is let's not jump to labels and let's have conversations about the actual policies and what's actually occurring instead of just throwing labels around and then like kind of ending at that. And I think we do that with the paranormal.
It does. I agree with you. I wouldn't call him a Nazi, but we all know that that's a, Nazi idea that, people who are blonde, blue-eyed, and tall, I think he is tall. I don't think, and maybe had naturally blonde hair at one point in time. I don't know what his eye color is, so that's very problematic. And
For
most
sure.
of the
Yep.
policies they take, they do affect people who are brown disproportionately. I say, there are white people who are in the country illegal as well, but how often do they get removed compared to brown people, right? I mean, sometimes
Yeah.
they do, but certainly not the same proportion, right?
Yeah. I would not disagree with any of that. So, um, yeah, I guess for me, maybe we're probably saying the exact same thing, and our focus is just different. I think for me, I like to focus on the actual ideas, um, and talk about those. And I do this with like paranormal stuff. I do this with political stuff. I do this with, I mean, whatever. It's not just those two categories. I do this with like almost anything. If I have a, disagree with like a viewpoint, I try not to like have a conversation about the entire viewpoint. I try to have conversations about one thing at a time, right? Okay, let's talk about your statement about superior genes and what does that mean? Do you understand what you're saying? Because most people don't understand it. Um, do you understand? Let's talk about that one topic. And all this other stuff that's going on, we can get to that later. But I don't know. For me, I like to talk about one thing. And because of those singular things, I don't often focus on labels. Because when I do, that's when we start getting into like the weeds about other stuff. So maybe we're saying the same exact thing, just kind of in different ways, different focuses. Focuses? I don't know. But yes, thank you for your comments. I appreciate it.
But octopi, octopum, or octopi.
Right.
And then we have Kat here who's schooled me on the Canadian English, which I think I've got down. I think mostly got Canadians here, so I think I got Canadian English, not the accent, but the words. They're different. I think I got most of them.
Okay, it can either be foci or focuses. It's either one. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
I think foci is the correct Latin or Greek.
Yeah, it's saying it either is considered correct. One is Latin and the other is anglicized. So cool.
That's
I
good.
was just curious about this. So we're both.
Any more questions? Any more comments? Okay, so you can still think. I'll just go to the end here while you guys think about it. John, thank you very much. It was fantastic. And well, spoiler alert, we'll have John here in a couple of months again. We have another presentation. And I appreciate you being here. Oh, yeah, David, go ahead.
Oh, want to interrupt you. I was just going to say, you live in Raleigh, John.
Yes.
Yes, I used to live in Chapel Hill.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's actually so really I live in Morrisville, so I kind of live like right in between Raleigh and Durham, so I'm not far away from Chapel Hill at all.
Okay.
I used to go to Cat's Cradle all the time for music.
Okay. It's been a while since I was there, but okay.
Wow.
That was great.
Small
Thank you.
world.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John.
Hey, thank you.
Just let me show my last slides here. So, well, if you want to contact the speaker, Jon Michael, he used the link app. So you can go to linkapp.com/Jon Michael has questions and look for him, or just look for Jon Michael has questions on any platform and you can find him there. It's very easy to find. For next month, we will have a presentation by Kenny Beadle that John just mentioned. He'll talk about strategy for solving mysteries. And are you guys listening to me okay? Yeah? I just got a notification here that my internet's not working well. So it will be at a regular time, September 24 at 7 p.m. And I hope to see you guys here. And to end our presentation, please remember to spread the word. It's very important. John even mentioned that. We have two websites, RockyMountainAtheist.ca and WeCanReason.com. At the bottom of the pages, you can find all our social media. If you or someone you know think that Rocky Mountain Atheist is too atheistic, we try to keep we can reason less atheistic, right? So you can go there and see our content, critical thinking, our news, right? You can contact us, but with fewer comments on atheism. We also have our group, our Facebook group, Rocky Mountain Atheist, a private group, so it's kind of a safe location for us as well. And of course, you can always donate and become a member if you want. But the last thing you can do is to subscribe to our emails. We don't send that many emails. It's just one from Rocky Mountain Atheist and one from We Can Reason per week with the content that we share. And our newsletter, of course, that goes usually on the first or the last day of the previous month. So you can subscribe going to our websites. At the bottom of Rocky Mountain Atheist, there's a form there. And on We Can Reason, there's an option, I want to know more, in the menu. So you can use that option to receive our emails. And once again, thank you very much, guys. I see someone on the chat here. Let's see if I missed something. No. So thank you again. We still have 30 minutes. And hope to see you guys again next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you
John.
for having me. Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you. Thank you,
Uh,
Elio, for
Thank
doing
you
all
for
this.
Oh yeah, no, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Bye, guys. Have a good night.